Okay, my son left his quad here with me with a problem. This is a 2003 LTZ400. This is a beast of a machine, two-wheel drive, four-stroke. He loves it. This thing's awesome. He's had it for, I don't know, maybe a year or so. And when it sits for a while, a few days, a week or so, the battery is low. Sometimes it's hard to start. Sometimes he has to recharge the battery or jump start it or something. And so I'm not sure exactly what's going on with it, but I think he's replaced the battery once. That wasn't it. And he asked me to take a look at it. So I don't know if there's a parasitic draw happening while it sits. I do, just an observation, I see this kick-ass light bar on the front of it, which I'm sure is aftermarket. So that's a circuit to kind of look closely at, see if something is maybe drawing on that somehow. But I think the first thing to do is to check the battery voltage, start it, monitor the voltage, see if it's actually charging, and then we'll take steps from that point. Okay, this thing's been in here for a few days now. No one's touched it. I haven't started it. I haven't tried to do anything to it. I just want to check the terminal voltage here to see what we're starting with. We've got 12.5. We got a fully charged battery in here. So I'm going to start it, and I'm going to check this voltage when it's running, and this voltage should climb if the charging system's working correctly. It should climb to, 13.5, 14 volts or so when it's running. So let's try that. Alright, I'm going to check this voltage again now that it's running. Let's see what we get. 12.0, that's not good. Not charging. So it looks like we got a charging issue. Okay, so I know that the engine is not charging the battery. That's the problem he's having. The battery's only good. It can run the motor for a certain period of time, but with the lights on, it's just getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So the first thing I want to look for and check is the stator, which I believe is this connector right here. It's got 3 brown wires going to it, and I want to check I want to start here. So these wires go to the stator, and I want to make sure that none of these wires have continuity to ground. So that's what I want to check here. So I'm going to do a continuity test and make sure none of these are grounded. They should not be touching ground anywhere. I'm making sure I got a good connection here. And I'm not getting ground anywhere. Good. 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 Okay, I don't get the beep. Good. So now I know that the wiring in the stator has not touched ground at some point, which would render it non-functioning and bad, need to be replaced. So that's good. The next thing I want to do is to measure the voltage coming out of these 3 pins with the engine started. So I'm going to start the engine. I'm going to put my meter on AC, and I'm going to check that I get voltages out of all 3 of these wires. It's going to be AC voltage because it's a stator, and I'm not sure what to expect, maybe 30, 40, 50 volts out of each wire, but I'm just looking for voltage and the same voltage out of all 3 wires. So let's start the engine up and then we'll check using the AC voltage. Alright, so here's the meter. I've got one lead locked on the chain. Touching one of these. So another second pin. And the other pin. Alright, so this is good. Now, so I know the stator is working properly. It's putting out voltage. Somehow, for whatever reason, the voltage is not reaching, the battery yet. So we've checked one thing and we've got that figured out. It is not the stator, which is good news. Alright, so I've done a visual inspection on everything in here. It looks good. I don't see any problems. This relay is fine. I tested it. It works okay. These fuses are in good shape. There's other things underneath this body work over here on this left side that I want to get a closer look at, and I'm going to have to remove the battery. So I'll take the negative side off first, and then the positive side. Alright, so this uncovers all of the electronics here, and I'm just going to do a visual inspection and just look for anything that doesn't look quite right. Okay, this is the male side of the stator connector. Might want to see where that goes and see if we can't make sure that these wires are getting to where they need to be. That looks like dielectric grease in there. I find very often that you can find problems just by visual inspection, so that's what I'm doing. These all look good. Okay, so I've already tested the output of the stator, which we determined to be good, or I've determined to be good. So the stator comes in to this connector here, 3 brown wires, and 3 black wires come out into this harness, and this is the voltage regulator or rectifier. So AC is coming into this thing, and 14 volts DC will be coming out and going to the battery. On these two, so on the black and white wire going to the battery, the 3 black wires here are coming from the stator. So the stator goes from 3 brown wires to 3 black wires. The 3 black wires go into this rectifier, 1, 2, 3, and we'll start the engine and we'll confirm that we get the same reading out of these 3 black wires that we got out of these 3 brown. And then if this is working properly, we should get around 14 volts coming out on these 2 wires. So that's what we're going to check. Alright, so I'm suspicious of this voltage regulator / rectifier. I've checked out all the connectors. Everything looks fine. I don't see any obvious wires broken or corroded, heavily corroded or anything like that. Everything seems to have dielectric grease on it. Good connections. The battery is fully charged. However, when I start it, the battery voltage should jump up to 13.5, 14.5 volts or so from this unit, and it's not. I've checked the stator. These 3 wires these 3 brown wires from the stator. We checked that. I've got voltage coming out of all 3 of those, so I know the stator is good. These 3 brown wires go through this connector. They turn into these 3 black wires. And these 3 black wires go into this voltage regulator, in, and then out to the battery, a black wire with a white stripe and a red wire. These wires are going to the battery. So if everything's working properly, I should get the voltage from the stators coming in and coming out regulated to 14 volts or so DC, feeding and charging the battery constantly. So I want to confirm, I want to know, do I have 14 volts coming out here and it just doesn't get to the battery? Or do I not even have the 14 volts coming out of this thing and this is the problem? So I'm going to start the engine. I'm going to back probe this red wire going to the battery, and I should see 13.5 or 14 volts going to the battery, charging it while the engine's running. So let's try that. Stays here at 10 volts. So I'm not getting the voltage coming out of this thing. I just want to double check to make sure that the stator voltage through this connector is reaching this rectifier. So let me shut it off, change my meter over, and we're going to check the voltage on these 3 black wires to see if they're the same as the voltage we got on the 3 brown wires before the connector, just to verify that the wiring from the connector to this connector is good. Because if there's a break and these wires don't have voltage, then obviously they'll never get 14 volts out of here. So I don't have 14 volts here. Let me just confirm I've got the voltage here that I've got out of the rectifier, and if I do, then this thing is bad. So let me reset my meter. Okay, so I've reset my meter back to volts AC, 200 volts. I'm going to start the engine and we're going to probe here and just make sure that we're getting the stator voltages, which were, if I read the engine, it goes up to like 20 or 30 or 40 volts or 50, even higher. Let me make sure I'm still getting those readings here on these 3 wires coming in, because you got to get voltage coming in to get the voltage you want coming out. Back probing these wires coming from the stator. So this rectifier voltage regulator is getting the voltage it needs on all 3 of these wires. Doing anything with it. It's not spitting out 14 regulated volts. So I'm making the call that this regulator rectifier is bad and needs to be replaced. So we're going to order one. When we get it, I'll come back, I'll install it, we'll recheck it and see what happens. Okay, so here we are a couple days later, and I've got a new voltage regulator slash rectifier. I'm going to plug it in. We're going to take a couple voltage checks, and first thing I'm going to check is I'm going to look for voltage going to the battery, and let's see what we get. Alright, now we want to check, and let's see if we've got 13 or 14 volts coming from here going to the battery. So I've got my meter here set on volts DC. I've got a ground. I'm going to clip it right to the chain. I'm going to back probe this red wire, which is going to the positive side of the battery. So we should be getting battery voltage readings, which we do. 1148. See, battery's getting weaker and weaker just sitting here for a couple days. Now, hopefully I'll start this engine up and that voltage should climb way past 12. So let's see. Here we go. This is good. We got 13 volts now, so it's regulated, so it shouldn't skyrocket even if you rev the engine. Alright. So that confirms the fix now. This thing was bad. We had our stator voltage coming in. We had nothing really coming out. We replaced this, and now we're reading over 13 volts with a new regulator rectifier. So I'm going to call that fixed. Now I'll just reassemble everything and we're back in business. So until next time, thanks for watching.